What's going on, guys? Welcome to the 10 Second Gems podcast, episode 3, brand new episode. So far, I've been getting a lot of love and a lot of compliments on the podcast. So far, I've gotten a lot of notes from friends and some people that I don't even know that just happen to be someone shared the podcast link with them. And yeah, I'm getting a lot of feedback, a lot of good feedback, a couple things that people are like, hey, try this next time or try that. I'm totally fine with getting feedback from people. So guys, thank you so much. I appreciate that. If you have not subscribed yet, we are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. We are on Spotify and on YouTube. The YouTube episodes go up on Wednesdays. The regular audio streaming goes up on Mondays. I was gonna do it every other Monday, but got a couple emails from people I don't even know saying, hey, will you do, instead of every other Monday, like I said, I got feedback, will you do them every Monday? So that's gonna be a little rough, but I'm working on ideas on how to approach that. So yes, we're gonna do that. You have my word on that. I'm scared to tell you have my word, but you have my word, all right? So today I don't have a guest, it's just me. Sometimes it's gonna just be me. I got an email from a guy named Jeff. I'm not going to put his last name out there because I don't know if he wants it out there. He's from Pennsylvania. And he sent me an email to the 10 Second Gems email. By the way, that's 10secondgems at gmail.com. If you want to, if you want some advice, or if you want to hear something about a certain topic on the podcast or whatever, send me an email and I'll do what I can. All right. So in this case, Jeff knows of me, excuse me, from when I used to be an artist, a recording artist, and a producer. And he wanted to know some of my music industry stories. So for those of you that don't know, if you haven't checked out the intro podcast, go check that out. But I am a record producer by trade, also a singer, a songwriter. I had a record deal / publishing deal for 8 years. I toured the world for 15 as a musician. And yeah, so we're going to get into that. I mainly worked on the Christian side of the business, the Christian music industry side. So again, I'm not going to get into how I got into music and all that. I already did some of that in the intro podcast. If you guys want to hear a detailed version of that, with some crazy childhood stories, fights and all that kind of stuff, getting beat up, beating people up, I guess you could just ask me to do that on Gmail. But I don't want to assume that people want to hear stuff like that. So I want to give you guys, I want to open the floor, I should say, or give you a voice to give me a voice, right? So let's just start here. When I was 16, I was already making beats due to a series of events. I had a mentor. I had my grandmother bought me my first keyboard, and I just kind of got hooked. So by the time I'm 16, I'm in high school. I'm making beats for people in the neighborhood. I had me, my cousin, and another friend of ours that we grew up with. Let's just call him Ronnie. I don't want to put his name out there just in case he's not cool with that. So me, my cousin Lewis, and my cousin Ronnie had a group. They were the rappers. I was a producer. And, they were going off, hanging out with older guys, getting better at what they were doing, going to competitions, things like that. And then through a series of events, I was able to I started out with a Casio keyboard and then got my hands on an M1 Korg, which was at the time was like a really dope keyboard. Then I moved up to a Korg N364 and I was stepping my game up and I was getting better, but I wasn't sampling records. Since I was learning how to play piano, I was playing all the melodies, everything in my beats, I was playing them. I wasn't sampling records. So one day, Ronnie, one of the guys in the group, let's just call him Ronnie. Ronnie comes up to my apartment where I'm living with a couple friends of mine. Shout out to Uncle Paulie and Chico. I had actually gotten kicked out of my house for something that I didn't do. And my grandmother would have never done that. But as much as my grandmother loved me, it was a lot of tough love, and I needed that. So I was living with some homies. I was trying to go to school. I was pretty much on my way to dropping out. And Ronnie comes over to the house and he's like, yo, I was with these boys from New York last night, and they got a record label in New York. So I was telling them about you and about Cuz or whatever, and they wanna meet you. So I'm like, yeah, set it up. Now these guys, just to give you a quick overview, so these guys are basically, they let's call them, they're bosses in the streets. Let's just leave it at that. They're bosses in the streets. These are real bosses in the streets. All right, so he's like, cool, I'm gonna set it up. So then one day out of nowhere, maybe like, I don't know, 2 weeks later, he calls and he's like, yo, the boys, they down here and they on the block. I'm getting ready to go see them right now. Why don't you meet me down here? Excuse me, guys. I had coffee this early morning. I usually do these at night. But anyway, so I go down, me and my cousin go down, and my cousin spit some bars for them, and then I play some beats for them. And so then the big dog, the big boss of that family or whatever, the guy that's in charge of the record label, the big boss. So he's like, yo, what y'all doing tomorrow? And of course, we all got to go to school tomorrow. I'm like, look, man, I live on my own. I'm supposed to be at school tomorrow, but whatever, it's whatever. And he's like, y'all want to go to New York? And we like, yeah, let's go to New York. Yeah, like, let's do it. What time you want us to come back? And like, no, we leaving right now. So, so long story short, we get in like a Suburban. We go up to New York. We in New York for like 2 days. While we were in New York, we just meeting everybody and just kind of like feeling things out. Pause. And so we leave New York, but I left an impression with them. I left a CD with some beats, and I left an impression where people was like, yo, you all right, you know what I mean, whatever. And my cousin Ronnie and Louis, we all left an impression on them. So we go back to Philly, and like 2 days later, I get a call from the big dog. And he's like, yo, what you doing tomorrow? And I tell him again, I'm like, look, man, I live on my own. I ain't doing nothing. Like, what's up? And he's like, yo, I'm gonna send somebody to get you, to pick you up and bring you to New York tomorrow. And I'm like, cool. So it's just gonna be me. Like, yeah, I'm gonna bring Ronnie and Lou back up, but for right now, I need to see you by yourself. So I'm like, cool. So I go back to New York. He sends a car for me, and so I get in the car, go to New York. And for those of you that don't know, New York is 90 miles from Philly. So the dope thing about Philly is that you 90 miles from New York, like 90 something miles from DC, 80 something miles from Baltimore, something like that. You basically like 2 hours away from just about all the dope cities in that area. So while I'm in New York, it's me and him in the studio in the Bronx. They had a studio in the BX on Fordham Road, close to Jimmy's Cafe, right on Fordham. I won't get the exact address, but so me and him in the studio, and he's just like, yo, listen, I want to sign you to be a part of what we doing. Now, before I came back on the first visit, they had two producers already there. They had a white boy named they called him Yella, right? I'll say his name because I don't care about that. His name was Yella, and then the other producer's name was Karan. So Karan I hadn't met. Karan wasn't there in the 2 days we was there, but we met this dude Yella. So Yella was giving me the bad vibes from the jump. You know what I mean? Like, he definitely did not want me there. So when I come back up and the big dog is talking to me about, listen, I want to bring you on. I'm like, cool. Is everybody cool with that? So he looked at me, he like, what you mean everybody? I'm everybody. I say, like what I say goes here. So I'm like, cool. And he tells me, why you say that? And I'm like, nah, I just get a little vibe that, like I kind of get a little vibe from one of the guys that they don't want me here. Excuse me, I'm gonna take a sip of this coffee. So he's like, listen, from now on, I'm everybody. You just need to know that anything happens here, anybody say anything negative to you, you talk to me and I deal with it. So I'm like, cool, no problem. So he tells me, but before we shake hands on this, because there was no contracts, we shaking hands. So he's like, before we shake hands, you got to make me a beat. It's a specific beat. And if you can make me that beat in 30 minutes, is we shake hands. So I'm like, cool. He tells me, I want, you know, that Beethoven joint, da 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, I know that. That's for Elise. I kind of know how to play it. He tells me, cool. You got 30 minutes. I'm gonna come back. When I come back, if that beat ain't done, I'm gonna send you back to Philly. And I'm like, all right, cool. So 10 minutes later, I come out of the A room, and I'm like, yo, where's Big Dog at? He in the kitchen in the studio. I go in the kitchen. I'm like, yo, you want to come listen to B? It's done. So he's like, get the F out of here. It's done. I say, yeah, come on, let's listen. So he's like, yo, he stops me in the kitchen. He's like, listen, don't give me no BS. The beat better be dope. Well, I'm gonna send you back to Philly, and you're never gonna come back up with Ronnie and with Lou. So I'm laughing. I'm like, bro, come on, you didn't bring me up here for nothing. Let's listen. So he listens. Long story short, for about 20 minutes, he just sitting there listening to the beat on loop. And I'm just sitting there like, okay. So eventually he tells me, yo, stop the beat. I stop the beat. He reaches out his hand and he shakes my hand and he says, all right, now how much you want, you know, whatever, like what's the deal with the money? And I'm like, listen, man, I'm selling beats for $100 in the hood. So, you know, like I don't know how any of this works. And he gives me a number. He's like, all right, every time you come to New York, I'm gonna give you this much money in cash. And I'm like, all right, yeah, that works. Like, I'm not, first of all, I was a kid. At this point, I'm 17. I just turned 17. So I'm like, good, that works. Let's do it. So I become part of this crew or whatever. And yeah, through that, I meet a bunch of people. I get to hang out in certain studios in New York. So that day, but going back, I'm jumping ahead. So before the end of that day, Karan, the other producer that I hadn't met yet, he comes to the studio. So we meet, and the Big Dog tells him, yo, this is Liquid. He's officially one of the new producers. It's gonna be you, him, and Yella. So I'm like, all right, cool. So Karan's like, all right, cool. So everybody leaves the studio to get food, and the Big Dog is like, yo, y'all need to chop it up or whatever. And when the other boy come, y'all all need to chop it up because y'all gonna be working together. So everybody leaves, and it's me and Karan in the studio, and Karan tells me play him some beats. So I play him some beats, and he's just kind of like doing this. All right. So he's like, yo, you know how to use an MPC? Because I'm noticing you playing all your beats through a Korg Trinity. Shout out to all my Korg Trinity users. So I'm like, nah, I never used an MPC before. And he's like, nah, B, you got to learn how to use an MPC if you're gonna rock with us. So I remember what he said to me about what the Big Dog said. So I'm like, well, the Big Dog said I'm here to stay. And he's like, yeah, but I'm gonna tell you right now, people not gonna want your beats if you're not. You gotta step your game. Your drums ain't very good. And my ego was damaged a little bit because I'm like, yo, this dude, who is this guy telling me my drums ain't good? So he's like, all right, come on, pull up a chair. So we had an MPC, like they had an MPC on a stand with wheels. So he pulls the MPC up and he starts showing me like just the little basics or whatever. So he's like, yo, I'm also noticing, like, and while he's teaching me that, he's like, I'm also noticing you not sampling records. And I was like, nah, I don't need to sample records. I know I can play keys. And he's like, you're gonna learn how to sample records today. So again, I'm like, this freaking guy, like, who is this guy, man? So, you know, but again, I'm in no position to argue. I'm just a kid. I'm a 17-year-old kid from the streets of Philly. I'm just like, all right, whatever. So he finds a sample. We start digging through stuff, and he finds a sample. He's like, you like this? And I'm actually, in my mind, I'm like, damn, that's a dope sample. It was a James Brown joint. So I'm like, yeah, that's dope. And he's like, all right, so let's sample it. So he starts showing me how to cut and trim and all that. And how to put the samples on different pads and how to make them loop and cut, and just teaching me all this stuff. This is like 3 hours go by. By this point, everybody's back. Food is back. Big Dog is in the studio watching him teach me. We not eating. Like, the food is out there. Everybody ate. Studio's packed with a bunch of dudes. And so by the end of it, I had my introduction into the MPC world. And that whole week, I ended up being in New York the whole week. And throughout the week, the other guy, me and Karan getting real close. Karan's teaching me, taking me under his wing, explaining how things work. And the other guy don't like me. And he making it clear. And I'm telling Karan, like, yo, this dude don't like me. Like, what's the situation? And he like, yo, don't worry about him. Trust me. Don't worry about him. Don't worry about him. Just, he, you know what I mean? He like that. So I leave. I leave New York. I come back the next week. The day I get back, somebody steal a gun from the studio. Now, again, I'm dealing with big street dudes. All right. So these are not Shylocks. These are bosses. All right. So gun goes missing from the studio. And as you can imagine, those of you that are from the street or, you know, whatever, you know what that means. So the big dog's not happy. And turns out that there was some speculation as to who took the gun. So we all get called to the studio, everybody, right? The next day after the gun go missing, I get called into the studio, and I'm just sitting there like, yo, I wasn't saying nothing, but I'm like, it wasn't me. I definitely didn't take the gun. And but I'm just sitting there. Big dog is going off on everybody about the gun. So literally he get done that conversation, and it ends with, when we find out who did it, you out. You know what I'm saying? You out. And some other things were said, but I'm not gonna get into that. So literally like 10 minutes later, the dude that don't want me there goes in the studio while the big dog is in there. Ain't nobody going into that room because he in there hot, but he's in there, you know, whatever. So I'm outside in the lobby or whatever, and the next thing you know, they start talking or whatever. I can hear it, like overhearing a little bit, because the voice volume is getting kind of loud. So he ends up, basically, the big dog ends up telling the other producer that he was done. He had to go. So I find out later that he went in and basically was asking about me, like, why was I still coming to the studio, blah, blah. So that dude is out. So basically it's me and Karan are the producers. I won't get into the whole story about that what happened, but it wasn't an argument. There was no arguing with the big dog. It wasn't a quiet conversation. So dudes get kicked out the studio. A couple of the artists that were there got kicked out too, because they came with the other producer boy. So it ends up being me and Karan. So yeah, so I go from that. I do that gig for like 3 years. Couple crazy stories. We went from being in the Bronx to, they ended up getting a studio like on 45th, I think it was, in Manhattan, a high-rise studio joint. We was in there, bunch of crazy stories. There was always guns around, and yeah, I don't want to get into them crazy stories, but I'm telling you that to tell you, just to show you, like, again, my journey, kind of. So I'm gonna tell this story just because I wanna shout the big dog out if he's listening. So these was all like gangster dudes, man. Everybody, down to the littlest guy in the group. These was all like real street dudes. Me, I grew up in the streets, but I wasn't a street dude. I never, you know what I mean? I already told y'all, I was just a kid that lived in the hood. So the big dog had this thing with me where he was like, I was protected always, no matter what. Anything went down, he always made sure I got out first. He would make sure he'd get me out, and then whatever was gonna happen was gonna happen. And since I was telling him a story one time about how I grew up in church, so he would call me choir boy. That was, sometimes it was either yo Liquid, or he would be like, yo choir boy. He would always call me choir boy. So for some reason, and I feel like this was God's grace in my life, not to get spiritual or anything like that, but I believe that it was God's grace in my life that kept me protected through that whole time. So one night they all leave the studio for the night. I decide not to go to the hotel. I decide to stay in the studio. So it's me and another artist. That was my man too. I won't drop his name, but it was me and him. And somebody left a gun out in the A room. So it was 3 rooms in that studio: A room, B room, and the like the vocal room. So somebody left a gun out, and the other artist that was there had to go to his crib. It's like 3 a.m. He had to go to the crib and come back. So he's like, yo, I'm gonna call 25. By the way, there's a cab company in the Bronx. We had they had the cab company on payroll. So anytime we had to go anywhere, we wouldn't call a cab. We would call that cab company, and we would just ask for certain people, and them people was on payroll with us. So they would come get us no matter what. They had to stop what they was doing to come get us. So cuz like, yo, the driver that used to basically take the artists around was different than the driver that used to come get me and the big dog. That the same driver. So he's like, yo, I'm gonna call, I think his name was Salim. He was like, I'm gonna call Salim. I gotta go up to the BX. I'm gonna come back. So Salim come pick him up. I'm in the studio by myself. It's like 3:30 a.m. and it's a gun in the studio. Now I'm not thinking nothing of it. I'm just working. All of a sudden, the bell rings. The bell. So I'm like, all right, somebody's here. But that's weird because everybody that's supposed to be here got the code. So I go to the door, and it was a big lobby, and then the door was like double doors, and you could see through the door, but they couldn't see into the studio. It's 2 cops. So I'm like, oh, it's a gun in the studio. I'm not touching that gun. You know what I mean? So I'm getting nervous, and it felt like it was like 10 minutes, but it was probably like 30 seconds. So the cops like doing this and knocking, boom, 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 and they ringing the thing. So I open the door. I'm just like, yeah, like, can I help you? And they're like, listen, we keep getting phone calls about, you know, this something going on in this floor. And I'm like, is it noise? Cause we banging music all day long and it's nothing. He's like, no, we've been getting complaints, and we just got another complaint that there's a lot of stuff going on this floor, and we want to know what's going on. So I just said to him, like, do y'all have permission to be here? Right? That was the only thing, because of course I'm learning that from my childhood. So I said to him, I was like, y'all got permission to be here? And he was like, well, we got a phone call. And he said, I didn't ask you to come in. And I said, well, I didn't say to you, I'm just saying, like, do y'all have permission to come in? And he's like, no, we don't. And we didn't ask to come in. We just want to know what's going on. Who's here? So I said, it's just me. I'm here. I'm a producer. I basically got the studio rented out till tomorrow, and everybody's gone for the day. So the cops like, oh, it's only you, this and that. So for like a good 5 minutes, they keep trying to like trip me up. And I keep telling them, I'm a producer. I'm here by myself. I rented the place for a day. I don't know what else to tell y'all. So the cops like, all right, we're going to come back. And when we come back, we're going to come back with paperwork to come into the studio. And I'm like, cool, well, do what you got to do. But I'm telling you right now, I'm here by myself. I'm not comfortable with y'all being here. You don't got permission to be here. So they leave. So like 7 rolls around, 7 a.m. I'm in the studio, sleep. Big Dog comes in the room, and I wake up to him being like, yo. He's like literally yelling at me like, yo, Liquid. So I wake up, and he's like, yo, what's that? And it's a gun just sitting on the console. And I'm like, I don't know, somebody left it here. And the cops came last night. Big Dog was mad. So I tell him the whole story. So again, he lined everybody up. As people getting back to the studio, he lining people up, going off on people. And that never happened again. And he made it very clear to everybody that to keep me to keep me and Karan, my man Karan, to keep both of us out of all that type of stuff. And he was just, it was crazy. I'm not gonna get into the whole what he said, but so shout out to the Big Dog. You know who you are, man. You always take care of me. There was another situation where we was in the cabs. The driver that drove him everywhere, his number was 25. To this day, I never knew his new name. I just knew him as 25. So it was me, the Big Dog, in the car with 25. Salim got a couple artists in the front car, and there was another joint behind us. I can't remember that dude's name because I think I only saw that dude one time. But for some reason, them 3 drivers, and there was another one I never saw, that they was all on payroll. So there was a situation where it a dudes from another block that got into a situation with the family that I was with, and the big dog had gotten stabbed. This is before I met them. When I already met them, he already had this limp, but the big dog had gotten stabbed like from his leg all the way down and almost died. Like, it was like a crazy, like a war in a club one night. So we in the cab, we get down the block, and all of a sudden one of the boys that was in that war with them is on Fordham, but he on Fordham like across the street, right? So all of a sudden, the first cab, Salim, the cab pulls to the side, and then 2-5 pulls to, they all start pulling to the side. He like, yo, what y'all doing? And then the phone rings. Big dog picks up, he like, yo, why are we pulling over? Somebody tell him, yo, look who's across the street. So big dog hops out of the cab that I'm in with 2-5. He take out a knot of money like that. I don't even know how much money it was. He like, yo, Liquid, here, put it in my hands. He said, go to the studio. If we not in the studio in an hour, go back to Philly, take the money, leave. Right? So nothing ended up happening. Boy got away or whatever. They come back to the studio. We get back down to the studio, and Big Dog is like, yo, where my money at? So I give him the money back. He unrolls the money, give me like a stack. I'm not gonna say how much he give me a stack. And I said, what's this for? You already gave my money for the week. He's like, that's for doing what I told you to do. I'm laughing because I'm thinking about all these little funny stories with him. But he was very protective of me, almost like a big brother, man. And dude, if you're listening, I will love you forever for that. You are an angel, man. To me, you're an angel. Even though some people may disagree, you're my angel. You were my angel at the time, man, and I appreciate you. So anyway, so that was during that time in New York. I learned a lot about the business, thanks to Quran and my big brother, the Big Dog. I'm gonna put his name out there. And so after that, I actually was they had kind of moved on to do other things, and I didn't want to be involved because it was just circumstances. So I decided not to stay with the guys, but I would still go see them once in a while or whatever, but I just wasn't a part of that. So one night so at this point I'm like 20, I just turned 21. And I had a group of guys that I grew up with. Somehow we all ended up linking back up as grown men, you know what I mean? So at this point it's like 10 of us. So we start I would say like 6 of the 10 guys was all like youth group kids. You know what I mean? Like at that point we had already been to youth group. I used to play keys at church, all this stuff, you know what I mean? So these are guys I went to church with and guys I grew up with since I was like a little kid. So we start partying, going to clubs, this and that, you know what I mean? And we ended up, there was a bar on 4th and South in Philly, right there on South Street. 4th and South was above a pizza shop. So we go there one night, and the bar is dead. And the boy that runs it is a boy from New York. So of course, me and him hit it off. We start talking bloody. And at that point, we had a third rapper in the group, So now it's my cousin Lou, our man Ronnie we grew up with, and then my cousin Lou meets this other guy. Let's call him Mike, right? So me, Ronnie, and Mike, I'm the producer, they're the rappers or whatever. Well, Mike somehow ends up being like, yo, this bar is dope, you know what I mean? It's dope, but he telling the dude that run the bar, like, why is this so dead in here? He's like, yo, it's just been hard trying to get people in here, blah, blah. So Mike is like, yo, give us 3 weeks and we're gonna get this bar popping, but you gotta give us a VIP. So somehow over the next 3 weeks that bar goes from like 3 or 4 people being in there to popping. By like the 3rd or 4th week, we had the bar packed. So sure enough, we had a VIP. And Ronnie knew this girl. I don't know where he knew her from, but for some reason, one night they come down to the bar. Well, they came down to the bar because we had it popping or whatever. And Ronnie and my cousin, I think, invited her. So she come down, and somehow, for some reason, me and her end up at the bar, like outside of the VIP, and we talking blah blah. And So she's like, yo, you make all the beats, right? For them or whatever. And I'm like, yeah. So she's like, I was just in LA with a friend of mine and this other producer named blah blah. I'm not gonna say his name because that's corny. So that producer happens to become my favorite producer like shortly before I meet her. So I'm like, yo, that's actually my favorite producer. That's crazy. You met him, blah blah. She's like, yeah, we was up there with him, this and that. So I had a plan. I'm gonna buy this girl drinks all night until I get her to agree to introduce me to that producer. So that's what happens. I buy her drinks all night. I'm being friendly with her all night. And I made it a point to tell her, like, yo, I'm not hitting on you. I hope you think I'm not hitting you or hitting on you or whatever. I just really like your vibe. I think you cool. And she's like, whatever, it's all good, liquid. So I just wanted to let her know, like, yo, I'm not trying to hit on you or nothing. She's like, nah, it's all good. So that night, my man Paulie was supposed to drive. He drove me home, like supposed to drive me home because me and him lived together. And the fellas, we all supposed to meet back at the crib. We would leave the bar, meet back at the crib at 2:00 and burn it up till like 4, right? So I tell everybody, yo, go ahead. I'm gonna see if this girl take me home. So I ask her like, yo, do me a favor, take me home or whatever. She's like, yeah, I don't live far from y'all. I need somebody to come with me anyway because I'm kind of nice. So I told my cousin Lou, like, yo, ride with us. You know what I mean? This girl gonna drop us off at the crib or whatever. So she take us home, but on the way home, I'm basically like souping her up about introducing me and the fellas to this producer. So long story short, I end up coming to Nashville to produce a record for an artist named Verbs. Shout out to Verbs. I did 2 songs on that record, but while I'm producing that record, I get a call from Mike and my cousin, and they like, yo, the shorty, I can't remember her name, she's about to introduce us to the boy, blank, the producer, and can you get back? And I'm like, nah, I can't get back, I'm in the middle of a record. So they're like, all right, cool, we're gonna meet with him and then we'll let you know what happens. Long story short, they call me from the studio. They end up basically going to the studio with this dude and they're with him all night. Long story short, after that, they end up with a deal with the dude. So they end up going to LA, coming back from LA, and I'm just giving you like a brief thing because I don't want to make this podcast 2 hours long. But at some point, I end up having to sell my stuff because I was pretty much homeless. I was basically living with a homie, but I wasn't paying rent or nothing. Shout out to my man Paulie for holding me down all that time. So I ended up having to sell a lot of my equipment. So all my equipment, I had to sell my MPC, I had to sell my Trinity. And a friend of mine was like, yo, I'm thinking about going up to driving up to Cali just to drive up there. And I'm like, damn, and so he tells me like, why don't you come with me? Your pop live up there, right? Maybe we could stay at your pop crib. I just think he would need us somewhere to stay. But that's my man though. So my man Rennie, I should say. So I end up calling my dad and I'm like, yo, listen, my man's trying to drive up to Cali, to LA, and I want to drive up with him. Is it cool if I come up? And he's like, yeah, of course. What are you talking about? So anyway, so we drive up to Cali. We're staying with my dad, me and him. Eventually, Rennie leaves LA maybe 3 weeks later, 2 weeks later, comes back to Philly, and I stay. My dad tells me, yo, stay. It's time that you stay. Ain't nothing for you in Philly. Stay here. Let's keep building our relationship, whatever. So somewhere along the first month and a half that Rennie has gone and I'm living back in LA with my dad is like, yo, so let me ask you a question. What's up with the situation with the music? And I'm like, well, I'm waiting on the guys to decide what's going to happen, this and that. Well, the guys end up coming back to LA. So they come back to LA. I'm already living there. And so now basically the guys are waiting on a record deal. We all waiting on a record deal. That producer went to Miami to work with another artist, a big time artist. I won't say her name either. And while we was waiting for that to happen, my dad is noticing that we waiting on this deal, but I'm not making music. So he asked me again, like, yo, what's up? You talking about you make beats, but I don't ever see you making beats. Like, are you making beats over at such and such house? And I'm like, no, I'm like, Pop, I had to sell my equipment because I was basically homeless. You know what I mean? He knew that already. And that's another reason I think why he basically wanted me to stay in LA, because he's like, yo, you stay here, you got somewhere to stay. So long story short, my dad ends up telling me, yo, go on eBay, get whatever you need equipment wise, and I'm gonna get it for you. So I'm like, what? So anyway, I end up going on eBay. I find everything I need for like, it was probably like $2,200, and my dad pays for it. So I got my gear back. I'm making beats in LA. I meet a girl out there who ends up being my wife. That's a love story gem joint. I'm gonna get with y'all one day on that. But so the guys end up going back to Philly because the producer dude never came back from Miami. He basically told everybody, yo, y'all got to go back to Philly, and I'm gonna get with y'all later. So they go to Philly. They go back to Philly, and then like 2 or 3 weeks into them being gone, I start getting conversations going with my buddy in Nashville. So I go back to Philly, and I'm still kind of talking back and forth from Nashville, but nothing's happening. I was supposed to go produce another song, but nothing's happening. So eventually, I end up back in Nashville through a very cool series of events. Again, I don't want to get into all that because I'm trying to keep this thing short, but eventually I will. If you want to hear more about that, I can hit you with that story later. But so I end up in Nashville. I end up with a Christian record deal as a recording artist, and then I end up with a publishing deal at the same time. Those are two different worlds. If you want to know what the difference is, go Google it. But they're both hard to get, and through God's grace, I was able to get both. And so I started my career as a producer in Nashville. Now, again, I'm jumping ahead of myself. I have this all written down, but I get excited, guys. So real quick, before I leave Philly for Nashville, about 3 months before that, my man Karan, who's my mentor, my big brother, he calls me. He's like, yo, I'm riding around. I'm touring with Petey Pablo right now. For those of you that don't know, just Google him. So he's like, yo, I need beats. Send me some beats. I'm in the car with him all the time. So I send him some beats. And long story short, like a month later, I ended up getting that record. So it was my first time producing a song for a major recording artist under a major record label. It was under Arista, I believe. And so I did the record with Petey Pablo, got paid on time, everything, 10 grand. It was my first time, you know what I mean? 10 G's for a beat. That was crazy. I was selling beats at that point for like 300. And I ended up on that record. So shortly after I do that record, the Nashville thing happens. So I leave for Nashville. I get the deal, both deals. I'm working on stuff in Nashville. Now, Jeff, my man that emailed me about wanting to hear about these gems, he wants to know specifically about the Christian side of all this. So here we go, Jeff. So I come to Nashville, and I'm like I said, I'm from the block, I'm from the streets, man. So I come here with this whole idea that I can put down my my walls, my security walls, and I can kind of be free and be around brethren and all that. And I met a lot of people that I was a fan of. Out of Eden was like one of the groups that I was really a big fan of. I got to meet them. They used to hang out actually at my boy's house. My boy's he worked at the record label that I was signed to, and I got to meet Grits and a bunch of other artists that I really like. And I was actually chilling with them, not meeting them, but just chilling with them at the crib. It was dope. Shout out to Out of Eden and Grits, man. They were very good to me when I was a nobody. And I don't know, maybe I'm still a nobody, but at that time I was just a new guy in town, and got to meet a bunch of other people, a bunch of the DC Talk. I mean, all three of the DC Talk guys. And just imagine, just think about it. I got to meet all these guys that I wanted to meet, a lot of guys that I listened to. And then I started producing stuff. So I ended up remixing a couple of Toby Mac songs. I remixed some Grit songs. I got to produce a song on the Out of Eden joint. Should have been 3, but long story. I'm not gonna get into that. I got to write some songs with Lisa from Out of Eden. Shout out to Lisa. And yeah, so I was just living like this crazy dream. There's a whole story tied to this as well, a whole spiritual story that if you want to hear it, just tell me you want to hear it, and I'll drop it one day. But so Through my Nashville stuff, I got to tour. I got to work on some records with people that I listened to as a kid. Yeah, and I just got to do a lot of stuff here, man. There's a lot of stories. I toured with KJ52 for a while, played a bunch of arenas with him. Me and DJ Madge, who happens to be my best friend in the world right now. Me and him toured together for like 8 years on tour buses and vans. Man, I don't know. There's a lot of stories there. But I will say, about the Christian music industry, like, I'm grateful for my time there. I'm very grateful for my man DJ Madge. He taught me a lot about how to maneuver. But when I got here, I didn't get no warnings from people. I thought I was coming here to be with brethren, and actually I'm gonna drop a gem on y'all real quick, and I'm gonna recap the gems at the end. But here's a very important gem for those of you that want to move to Nashville to be in the Christian music industry. You need to know that you're not coming here to be with brethren. You're coming here to work with business people. The biggest, in my opinion, in my experience, not my opinion, my experience and fact, the biggest snakes in the music industry live on this side of the fence. That's a gem. Don't come here thinking that you're gonna deal with brethren. You're coming here to deal with people that wanna take your publishing. They want to take a majority of your publishing. They could care less how much money you get on the publishing. Publishing is where the songwriters make their money. Research it, Google it. I'm not gonna break that down to you now. I'm gonna have a guy on here that's gonna break all that down. He's gonna be on an episode very soon. There's a lot of snakes and a lot of thieves on the Christian music side of the fence. That's just the way it is. There's a whole thing here, well, in the music industry, you got to pay your dues, man. You got to pay your dues. You got to do things that you got to do things for cheap. You got to do things for free. When I got here, I was getting hit with that a lot. Oh, you got to pay your dues. You just got here, blah, blah. But it comes to the point that if you don't start telling people like, whoa, this is what I charge, then people on the Christian music side, they'll keep you paying dues until you move out of the city broke. And that's kind of what happened to me. I have a lot of great stories. Please don't take this as me attacking anybody or me saying that this industry is I got a lot of great stories, but I also want to tell y'all the truth, because I don't want people to come here thinking that, people come to this town all the time to try to get into the Christian music industry, and they leave here mad at God, not understanding that you're dealing with people, not with God. You know what I'm saying? So just keep that in mind. But yeah, I got a bunch of dope stories. Why did I just say all that? You know why I just said all that? I'm thinking, and I got it here on my iPad, but I went to the dark side for a second. It's not the dark side, guys. Listen, there are a lot of people out there that for some reason don't want to tell the truth about the Christian music industry. But me personally, they don't pay my bills. And I'm tired of being careful about what I say about what goes on this side of the fence. There's a lot of ugly stuff that goes on this side of the fence, a lot of stuff people don't know about. And I think I got a sneaking suspicion that as this podcast goes on, that I'm going to end up kind of getting into that. I'm never going to drop names, but guys, listen, man, this is not an indictment on anybody. It's just that these are human beings we're dealing with. These are human beings, and we have to remember that. You know what I mean? So when you come here, just remember that. And not to mention, here's another gem. Artists, producers, you don't need no record label. You don't need a record label to make money in this town or in any town. You got the internet. There's no need for record labels or nothing. I didn't need a company to give me a podcast. I just created a podcast. That's a gem. You want to create a podcast? Create it. You want to make a record? Make it. Somebody tells you you're not a good producer? Produce a record. Put it out. There's a lot of young boys on Spotify and on SoundCloud making beats, making money. People that otherwise somebody would have told them, "Oh, your beats ain't good. You can't make money." If we had SoundCloud when I was coming up, I would have made way more money than I ever made on the street making beats. And I got told a lot that I was not ready to make beats for anybody and that my beats weren't good. I got told that a lot, and I still made it into the industry. So for those of you that are young listening to this, or I don't care if you're 50 years old, man, listen, if all your life you've been doubting yourself, get your shit together, buy a freaking laptop, Get Fruity Loops, get Logic, get whatever you gotta get. Start making beats. Now's the time. You don't need no freaking record label. You don't need no executive. Half these executives in the music business ain't never write a song in their life. They numbers guys. Don't let no numbers guys come in and tell you what you can and cannot do music-wise. Come on, man. Anyway, so I end up in 2002 making a record, 2003 with a record label that I got signed to, and again, I'm feeling myself. I'm coming from New York, so I'm thinking I'm dope. And the president of the label comes in after I turn in the record, and he comes to the house, to my apartment, and he listens, and he's like, "Yo, this record ain't done." And I was kind of mad because I'm like, yo, this dude, who is this guy telling me about? But he was absolutely right. The record wasn't done. He pushed me really hard. I'm not going to drop his name. I'm just going to tell you he pushed me, and he pushed me to be better at what I was doing. So I went back, redid the record, finished the record, turned it back in, and he was like, all right, it's ready. So the record dropped. I got to tour with a band called Salvador. I've toured with KJ52, DJ Madge. I've gotten to open for Salvador, Natalie Grant. I'm having all these blanks, but I've been on stage with some of the biggest names in Christian music. I know a lot of those guys. A lot of those guys are great. The artists are great. It's usually the corporate guys and the A&R. Some of these A&Rs out here. But another gem. If you are writing Christian music, man, if you in the Christian music game, stop letting these record labels and these companies get you for your publishing. Because a lot of times they'll tell you, especially if you're new, well, you got to pay your dues. Stop with that line, man. Stop letting people feed you that line of, oh, well, you're new around here, you got to pay your dues, blah, blah. Because they'll do that to you till they drive you out the city. And when you get back to Cleveland or Philly or New York or Jersey or wherever is it that you from, and you look back, these people going to be feeding their kids on your publishing money. Again, if you don't know what publishing is or why it's important for a songwriter to keep it, Google it. And then email me and say, yeah, you was right, cuz. All right, but anyway, man, so trying to think if I want to tell a bunch of funny stories, because some of the people listening to this don't really know who all these Christian music artists are. So maybe one day I'll just do a very specific joint just where I tell fun stories of the road. But I will tell one, when we used to be out on the road with KJ52, the drummer on that gig was Jamie. His name was Jamie, and the bass player is Rich. Shout out to my homies. I love y'all. I'm still with y'all. Those are still good friends of mine. And DJ X, he was the DJ on that, and I played keys. Well, we used to do text bombing, which we don't do that anymore. We don't do text bombing, but we would text bomb KJ, and we would text bomb him so much we would freeze his phone up, and he would have to either wait or turn it off, turn it back on, take the battery out, wait like 2 minutes. That's when cell phones were still kind of janky. But yeah, we used to do stuff like that on the road. One time Super Chick. So we was on a tour with Super Chick, and it was prank night on tour. And my man Rich, the bass player, he waited till like the most serious part of the night. And Super Chick was the closing act. He waited to the most serious part of the night, and he actually took like the do not cross, like the caution tape stuff, and he tied it to some pens. And literally in the middle of a super serious moment on the Super Chick set, he went out there and started doing interpretive dance while the girls like singing this serious song to like about like young girls and how God loves them and this and that. And my man Rich come out on stage with the pens and the do not cross doing some interpretive dance. Yeah, just a bunch of crazy stories. Jeff, I hope that I gave you something to laugh at. If nothing else, Jeff, this podcast is dedicated to you for reaching out on the Gmail to ask about some of these stories. But yeah, listen, guys, let me give you a couple gems relating back to my time in New York. One thing that Karan said to me while he was teaching me, because I asked him one day, what advice can you give me? And he said, this is what he said. He said, the advice I'm gonna give you is not about making music. You got that. You know how to make music. You know how to sample records now. Your drums are good. The advice I'm gonna give you is get under people that know more than you. Just get under them. Ask if you can go watch them in a studio. Ask if you can learn from them. Ask if you can go get coffee for them in exchange for some sort of lessons, and learn from people that know more than you. And that's a gem I will give to anybody. And that's for any business. Get under the guys that know more than you, man. I don't care how old you are or how old they are. I don't care if they're younger than you. Get under them, learn, man. This is about learning. And the other advice that I got from Quran, and I'm giving it to you, this is a gem. Be cool with everybody, whether you like them or not. Be cool with them. Because one thing about the music industry, I don't know about the movie industry, and I should have asked Michael Maschio this, is it's a lot of people working together in the music industry that can't stand each other. They cannot stand each other at all, but they getting money together. And that's one thing that you got to understand, especially y'all young people. It don't matter if you don't like somebody, man. Oh, well, I'm not going to be fake, blah, blah. Well, you're not going to eat. That's what I was told by my mentor. Sometimes you got to play the game. It's a game. That's why they call it the music industry game, right? Sometimes you got to play fake with people. But if it means you're going to make money and you're going to eat, do what you got to do. And when you get to the level where you don't got to necessarily work with them, don't work with them. Those are some gems right there. You know what I mean? I'm trying to decide on how many gems I want to drop here, because we coming up on 52 minutes. All right, yeah, so this is 10-second gems. We got to drop a couple more gems. So guys, remember, you're going to deal with people that you don't like. Just work with them, man, because these are the people that, number one, you may mess around and make a best friend. And number two, these are the people that are going to help you feed your kids. All right? Another gem. Don't let nobody take you for your publishing. Don't pay dues past a certain point. Your price is your price. Because you know, another thing that will happen, and another thing that happened to me in the Christian music industry, is that as I started speaking up and defending myself, and this happens in any industry, a lot of times people will start convincing you that you're being difficult to work with. Don't let people do that to you, especially in this Christian music industry. That is one of the number one games that people like to play here. Oh, you being difficult to work with. Oh, you making people nervous. One time I was at a meeting, right? And some money that I was supposed to get wasn't given to me. We're talking like months. And I'm married at this point. I got a wife. I'm not living on a lot of money. I got a publishing deal. It's not a lot of money. So I'm in the meeting and I'm kind of leaning forward when I'm talking to the marketing guy. And I'm like, listen, y'all said this, this, and this. And I'm talking like this. Now, I'm from Philly. I talk with my hands. I lean. I'm looking you in the face. I'm not even talking loud. I look over at the president of the company. I'm like, yo, like, blah, 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 this is what's going on. So I'm kind of like talking, but I'm doing this. And like an hour later, I get a phone call from my man, and he's like, yo, don't take this the wrong way, but like apparently you was making people nervous in the meeting. I'm like, how was I making people nervous at the meeting? What was I doing? And he's like, look, you got to understand, these people out here, they not like us, because this is my man that I grew up with in Philly that brought me to Nashville. He like, they not like us. They interpret certain things a certain way when you talk a certain way. And I told him, I said, bro, these people got you thinking that's the situation. And he's like, no, you got to understand that they not from where we from. And I'm like, nah, that don't make sense, bro. I'm telling him, I'm like, bro, that don't make sense. These people got you thinking that they scared of me because of the way I'm talking, but it's not that. It's that they want to be able to control the situation. And that's what started happening. Like I started hearing things around like town, or I'm on tour buses. I met a guy on a tour bus one time and he was like, oh yeah, you lick, okay, yeah, we talking. And he was like, yo, I heard that you could be kind of like rough, like when you talk to people. And I'm like, huh? What? And we on a tour bus. So I said, well, what do you think? And he's like, well, so far talking to you, nah, I don't really see it. And my man that was on tour with me at the time, like one of the musicians, he's looking at me, he's like, what was that about? And I'm like, ask him. So the dude is like, no, I'm just saying, I was having lunch with somebody. He didn't want to say no names, and your name came up and because we were gonna call you for a project, but they were just saying that that you could be a little hard to talk to sometimes. What? And even the musician that was sitting across from me in the tour bus, like, started laughing, and I'm looking at him like, bro, like, am I tripping or is that? And he's like, yo, he literally telling the other boy, like, who said that? And the guy's like, well, I don't want to put anybody's name out there or whatever. And he's like, man, I regret saying anything. And I'm like, nah, don't regret saying it. I'm not telling you to tell us who it was. I'm not gonna go beat nobody up. But yeah, like, who said that? He's like, nah, he wouldn't say. But the musician that was on the road with me, this is my man to this day. He, like, for the rest of the tour, like laugh. He kept bringing it up. And I would be like, yo, could you grab that for me? He's like, whoa, buddy. Whoa, tell me a little nicer, man. You're being kind of rough. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that's what happens when you start defending yourself and not letting people take advantage of you, especially in this industry, because the Christian music industry is a fishbowl, a really small fishbowl. And it's mad people in that fishbowl trying to grasp at the same money. And the circles here are really tight. What happened with me was I started realizing certain things, and I started realizing I was being taken advantage of, and I was being like manipulated a little bit, I guess I want to say. And I started being like, no, because, like I said, when I got to this town, I thought I was coming to be around brethren, and it just got to the point where I was like, yo, these boys really think I'm stupid. They really think I'm stupid. Like, who these people think they playing with? Like, yo, you know what I'm saying? But it wasn't on no physical, like, yo, who these people think I'll smack? I wasn't nothing like that. I just started saying, like, hold on a sec. I got to defend myself. I called my man Karan one day and I was like, yo, this is what's going on. And he's like, yo, B, defend yourself. Because on this side of the fence, now he's talking about the general market side, the secular market side. He's like, yo, over here, when you start defending yourself and you start showing them that you know what you're talking about with your publishing and all that, people start giving you respect. So that's what I started doing here. But when I started doing that here, people started talking around town saying that I was being scary and that I was being difficult to work with. And at some point, guys, I just decided, you know what? I was in a meeting at that record label. And when I left that meeting, I called my wife and I just told her, like, yo, you know what? This isn't worth it to me. Losing my character and end up physically hurt, because it was getting to the point where I was physically going to hurt somebody. And I just told my wife, I was like, it's not worth it to me. And my wife said, if you physically put your hands on somebody, everything that people have been thinking and saying about you around here, you're gonna completely make them right. So I decided it was time to just wrap it up. I didn't care no more about chasing A&Rs for records and none of that. I just stopped doing it. And I basically asked to be let out of my deal. And there was a whole thing that went on with that. Actually, the release ended up being pretty smooth by the end of it. But I asked to be released. So the last gem I'm going to give y'all, guys, before I let you go, I'm already over like 10 minutes, is this. And this is with anything in business, whatever. Business, real estate, whatever. Especially in the music business, guys. All money. Listen to me. Write this down. Put it on your on your mirror. Put it in your phone. I have this on a reminder on my phone that it rings every day at 5 p.m. And it's this: all money is not good money. That might sound stupid to you. That might not make sense, but I'm gonna say it again. All money is not good money. That's a gem within itself. What I mean by that is, pick and choose what you want to work on. Even if you broke, pick and choose what you want to work on. Denzel Washington, and you can Google this. I saw this probably like 10 years ago in an interview. He said he was turning down movie roles. And people were saying he was dumb for turning down movie roles. And he was like, nah, that ain't for me. They were telling him, dog, are you stupid? You going to make money? He's like, nah. And he kept turning down roles until he got what he wanted, or until he saw that something was fit. And guys, just approach life that way and business that way. Not all money is good money. I don't care if it's in the Christian industry or not. When I worked for Arista and I did that P.D. Pablo record, I got a call the next day like, yo, you coming to pick your check up, or you want us to mail it? What you want us to do? In the Christian music industry, how long was it? It was like 5 months, 6 months, right? I'm waiting on a check. I'm about to get married. I'm about to leave for Hawaii for my wedding. This is a couple days before I leave. I need that money. I go to the record label. I basically had to threaten to have a lawyer call them, and then literally within 2 hours, I got a phone call. Yo, go to such and such record label to pick your money up. Come on, man. Should it be like that? No. And it got to the point where I just wasn't taking work anymore with Christian record labels. I made more money when I quit working for Christian record labels, like producing stuff for Christian record labels. I made more money as an independent producer than I ever made working, producing songs or making beats for Christian rappers that was signed. This was a negative gem. No, it wasn't, man. I'm giving y'all some game right now. This should be called 10-second game gems. But anyway, listen, man. Hopefully I kept your attention. Hopefully you like this podcast. Hopefully you will subscribe. YouTube, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. The name of the podcast is 10-Second Gems. That's the number 10 second gems. 10 SECONDGEMS gems, right? 10-Second Gems podcast. I'm your host, Victor Oquendo. Some people call me Pete, my childhood nickname. Some people call me Liquid. That's my recording artist name, producer name, which I don't use very much anymore. Anyway, love y'all. Thanks for listening. I will see you on the next one. You will see me or hear me, depending on what. Anyway, you get what I'm saying. See y'all later. Have a good one.